This is not a test. Stay calm in an orderly fashion. Make your way to the lifeboats.
Mayday, the ship is sinking.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Wednesday podcast. So today is Wednesday, so that means that we will be doing a meditation, just kind of maybe talking a little bit about deeper things, maybe talking about what's going on in our lives, speaking to the recoveries. Maybe we'll find it relatable, maybe we'll find it silly and but either way.
Yeah. All right. So, well, yeah, man, it's been a long couple of weeks, man, for sure. You just got back from Indianola, Iowa. How'd that go, man?
It was pretty good. Had its pros and cons. It's always great to go back, see family, get to spend time with my grandparents, my parents, everything like that is always enjoyable for me. I get to see my cousin, who's really like a brother to me. But it also comes with the cons, right? So I'm back in the place I used to use. I see people that I used to use with. I see places I used to use. So it just brings up some old memories that I'd rather not really deal with at that time. So, it comes with the pros and cons, but I'd say overall the trip was really enjoyable. So.
Yeah, man. And it sounds like, I leave you generally alone about work matters while you're on vacation, but it sounds like generally, unless it's something like, hey, you didn't get this done, or, right, hey, there's a big project that's coming down the line that I need you to do a little bit of work on. Mm-hmm. But for all intents and purposes, when I called you, it sounded like you're having a real good time.
Yeah, no, seeing the family was, man, it was good. A lot of my family's kind of getting older, not in the best of health, so it's trying to cherish the moments while I can, sure, just really spend time with them as I kind of through my adolescence, I started smoking weed and kind of starting into the harder stuff at a younger age. So I didn't really spend quality time with them in the times where I was really coherent and more like aware and able to spend that quality time. So I have to kind of make up for that a little bit. So I always enjoy going back, seeing them and just being able to chat with them, and see their weird personalities and start to see where I get my weird personalities from,
Yeah,
like
dude, I hear you completely, man. I'm a man who, it's interesting, most of my family has either passed or, my growing up, we really didn't talk to them anymore. So I have like my immediate family, but when the matriarch of my family, my grandmother, passed, my family kind of fell apart. Nobody picked up the baton. We all just kind of went our separate ways, and we really don't talk anymore. And there's some other background reasons for that I'm not going to share on a podcast, right. But ultimately it wasn't until Caitlin came into my life that I really started to get some, get my ground and mooring again, what it means to have, a different set of family than I'm normally seeing. Because for a long time, I was by myself. I had my immediate family, yes, but they were all, deeply entrenched in their education or their career. So it's like we maybe would do a Sunday dinner every once in a while, but ultimately I was left kind of to raise myself and to do the things that I want to do. And so obviously, you've heard my testimony a million times. Don't blame my parents. Don't hold them. It's just a matter of fact. I'm not angry with them. I've made peace with the things that happened. But when I was younger, probably in my I want to say like 10, 13 in that area, my parents end up getting divorced. And then ultimately they both decided at the same exact time to go get their doctorates. Right. And if you know anything about that level of education, that is your job. And not only was that their job, but then they were, divorced, which means that they had to take care of themselves and their household. So they had to have jobs on top of that. So I had two parents simultaneously going to work full time. And then when they'd come home, they'd be locked in their study or in their library or locked in at the kitchen table studying for, this next thing or this next thing and this next thing. So they could both get their doctorates. And, the end result of that was my older brother at that time he was deep in his addiction. He was getting ready to kind of flee the coop. But my younger brother and myself, we had to raise each other. I had to raise him, I had to raise myself. And it was a weird moment. And when Caitlin came into my life, I had to all of a sudden hit all these triggers and buttons that hadn't been there for a long time. And I had to deal with like Oh God, political family dynamic. Okay, how do I handle this? What do I say? What do I not say? And fortunate enough, I was saved by that point, and I did a lot of study. I'm not an intelligent person by any means, but I can say that like there was a lot of wisdom that was garnered back then, and ultimately it led to me being able to successfully navigate family dynamics. And I'll tell you what, thank God for that, because I've got some screwy family dynamics. Love all of my extended family, love Caitlin's side of the family, but I have, family members that are on polar opposites of the political spectrum that, especially in today's day and age, real interesting. But yeah, what else happened while you were out there in Indianola?
In Indianola. Well,
Other than catching some ridiculous panfish, like you
Well,
sent me pictures of these things. I'm like, what is happening right now?
Yeah.
You next to a nuclear plant?
So my parents have a private pond, and no one really fishes it that much. And we actually had an issue with that in the early stages because like we I don't know, it was a long time, probably like 10 years ago or something. The pond froze over and then it snowed really thick on top. So no oxygen got through and it killed the fish. Apparently that's something that happens. I didn't know that, but so like
The more you know.
yeah, I know. So like the whole pond died off. So we had to restock it, and we had a major issue with them overpopulating. Bluegills will do that. They'll stunt each other because they get so overpopulated that they don't get very big, and then they get stunted. So something happened, and that no longer happens. So we got some just massive bluegill, crappie, good sized bass out there.
I
so
mean,
it's fun.
bluegill that's teetering on like record length, like
Not
that.
record, but
He was sending me stuff, and I was like, "Is that as big as your shoe? What is happening
not
right
quite,
now?"
Not quite.
I mean, just in absolute insanity. But it sounds like, and maybe this is the topic that we talk about today. It sounds like you had
Fishing.
you fishing,
Yes.
fishing and recovery. Thoughts?
Yes.
No. But the level of serenity that you need. We've done things on burnout. We've talked about the importance of callus. We've talked about the importance of self-regulation inside of the job, but there is no substitute, at least in my eyes, for being able to just check out for a week, or in your case, 2 weeks. I took a week staycation. I had family over, which it's always an interesting dynamic when you're like, I'm going to go on vacation. And then you have people over, and then you're like, this is another job. And like, it's a different job. I have to take one hat off and put another hat on. But I don't get me wrong. I loved it. I love his name is Papa Chops to my baby, his grandson. But Mike Becker, Elizabeth Becker, loved them to absolute death. They were just godsends. They came in, and Elizabeth cleaned up. She was basically like a nanny. Mike, he really, took the lead, and it was just so nice. It allowed Caitlin and I to get away for a little bit.
Mhm.
Went to Grand Rapids and stayed the night there. But back to my point, I don't think there is a substitute. Like, you need times where you can take a break, because it doesn't matter how much meetings you go to, or how much your schedule is regimented, or even how much self-care you profess. In our cases, not turning on our phone until 9, not answering calls after 5.
Right.
Like, it does not matter. Eventually, it's like this slow burning ember that slowly but surely grows, and it starts to compile, where it's like you deal with a little bit of traumatic incident, and it's fine, but there's a little bit left over, and then the next thing happens, and then there's a little bit left over, and so on and so forth, until all of a sudden you look back and you're like, geez, like, I need to just turn off my brain and not feel like I have to deal with this.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's kind of an interesting point. So like the vacation for me, I got to say, was not extremely relaxing, because it was kind of like when I go down there, it's
You
like
need a vacation from the vacation.
Exactly. Every family member wants to see me, wants to spend time with me, and I want to see people. So it's really like, I think of a vacation as like, my ideal vacation is like going, honestly, probably fishing, and like being out for a week, camping in a tent, no one else around, maybe like one other friend or something like that. But like, it was nice to see everybody, but I would not say it was necessarily relaxing.
Sure. No, I 100% understand what you're saying.
Yeah, I had one day where my mom had to go to work, and my stepdad had to go to work, and my dad wasn't in town yet.
Okay, thank the Lord.
I am just gonna sit over here and do nothing
and
today.
Watch paint dry.
Right.
But we are both men of faith, as it were, and something that I've heard countless amounts of sermons on in my years as a Christian and as saved and sanctified. But you know, using Jesus as the example of, even Jesus had to go into the wilderness to pray, and it's like he's at that point in time digging up, I think, something that is so necessary, and it's an archetypal necessity.
Here we go with the archetype.
Yes, an archetypal necessity for us as human beings, that we need time by ourselves.
Mhm.
If you are somebody who is uncomfortable completely to be by yourself, that's a problem. That's a problem. You may need to go seek some counseling for that. And I'm not trying to be facetious. I'm trying to say, like, you need to have time to, the world's completely canceled out, and you're able to process and talk within yourself, listen to your internal voice a little bit, have those conversations, process. Because I don't know if you did this, but when you went out there on vacation, did you think at all about the things that you've accomplished in the last like couple of years?
Yeah, so actually that was one of the more, there was a few things that were more profound to me throughout my, there always is when I go back there, but I saw I decided to meet up with some different people who were like clean now, weren't using, that I used to hang out with back in the day, whether that be just when I was smoking weed or drinking or whatever, versus when I was actually doing the hard stuff. I hung out with one of them, and they were doing good. They had, 2 years clean, something like that.
It's a good chunk of time.
Yeah, I mean, but I saw them, and it was kind of like nothing has changed, like they changed. They become like they're parents now, things like that, and that's really cool. But I feel like there hasn't been like a whole lot of forward progression, in the sense of like bettering the internal self. And I feel like that's something that's kind of unique to when you go into like support groups. That's something to really push on. So I feel like that was just one thing that I noticed. I'm like, and I hung out with another person too, that just wasn't really doing anything with their life,
Well,
And
you are pointing towards something really important. I want to let you finish, but with that point in particular, the importance of taking a moment and looking prospectively and introspectively about people around you that aren't doing anything, or people around you that have become so stagnant that there's no feeding there. You're going there out of habit,
Right.
basically.
when I was there, I'm like, well, the first people I hung out with, it was really good to see them, and it was cool to see them like clean, not like ruining their lives. So that was really cool. The second person I saw, it was like, or I don't know, it would have been the first or second, but the other person I saw, it was really depressing.
So
I don't want to go into too many details, but the state they were in, where they were staying, their attitude was like still at the immature level of when I knew them when I was like 15, and it was sad to me. It's like there was no forward progression, and they were like caught up in all this different stuff, and there was so much like, the drama this, drama that I used to be around all the time. And it made me stop and take a look after that. And I'm like, because here I'm surrounded by people that are very much so in a forward progression. The friends that I've chosen, the friends that I have, are always moving forward, always doing something, always have a goal, always are walking towards something.
And they're the type of people that if you're not,
you get called out.
Yeah. Immediately, saying like, what are you doing?
Right. So I'm usually around that. And I see some people moving like that have been in recovery longer or moving more in a different direction. And I'm like, I almost get a little bit jealous of it. And I'm like, why am I not moving like that? Why am I not working on those things? But when I went back there, it made me kind of realize like, man, you may not be exactly where you want to be right now. You may not have accomplished every single goal that you wanted to accomplish, but you've made extremely large strides forward in your life. And like, it was crazy because people saw me and they're like, man, you look different, you talk different, you act different. And I'm like, yeah, it's
Lost that Iowan accent.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I
don't
picked
think up a Michigan one.
I don't even think I don't think we have an accent in the Midwest. I believe we are one of the very few places that do not have an accent, but I'm sure everyone says that about the place that they're from.
You go down south and be like, good Lord, what is wrong with you?
I remember going down south a couple times and there was like,
well, that's something.
Yeah, that's interesting.
You ain't from around here, are you?
Yeah.
No, so there's two key points that I want to break apart while you were talking that I think is so relevant to recovery. Going back to what you said earlier, which is I've had friends. I had one friend in particular, and I'm not going to name them by name, but we used to be the crew that ran around with each other. There's three of us, four of us, but one of them dropped off. But three of us in particular that would kind of run and gun around with each other. And then one day, I was kind of looking up, and it was one of those moments where it's like we always hang out. All three of us have to hang out at the same time. Seldom do we ever hang out individually by ourselves. So one of them that I thought was doing a lot of things with his life, and turns out I was absolutely right. This guy is unbelievably successful. He's doing amazing things. He sits on the board of Lifeboat Addiction Recovery Services. He's one of my best friends in the world. He's just a great guy all around, and the person that he's chose to be the love of his life is so unbelievably oriented. She's an individual that you're intimidated by when you're on. You're like, good Lord, you are like, how do I be like you? But one of the things that I noticed, him and I started talking about, like, there's this place that we go, it was our other friend's house, where it seems like time literally stood still, literally stood still. Like whenever we wanted a break from our regular life, we would go there and it would be like we were 15 again. I mean, in a moment, but it was something where we both noticed the pattern of behavior where the individual was consistently 15 years old, which brings me to my other point, which is, the one of the frustrating things about sobriety, I think in general, is there are plenty enough people out there that end up getting sober, but then do not do the internal work. Or they end up getting sober, but they keep maintaining on the path that they were, not recognizing that sobriety is a gift that is meant to be utilized and given and added upon. And in the particular situation, like you were saying, you met this guy and it just seemed like time, he's not using, but time stood still. It's right. How do you feel you should combat that? How do you feel you should go about, like, when you stop using, what do you need to do next? Because I think too many people say, when I've stopped using, I've done it, I'm done. And they kind of progress forward. But there, a lot of times they don't realize, like, no, the journey begins now. Right. Like that was the door. You finally walked through the door. Now this is what's in the room that's going to lead to the next door and the next door and the next door.
Yeah. So that's a rough one. I feel like it's unique to each individual. Because I mean, we talked about this too. So like, it depends on what your moral compass is or what your driving force is in life. Some people choose religion. Some people choose like bettering themselves as a person. Some people choose success. Some people choose money. There's a lot of different driving forces out there. So like figuring that out is probably very important. Figure out what makes you happy, what you feel like is valuable to a human being. Like for me, I mean, we talked about this. I want to become the best person I possibly can be. Part of that's going to be my career, I'm sure. A huge part of that's my faith. Primarily, really, that encompasses probably all of it together. I want to make enough money to survive. I don't want to make like buku bucks and own a super nice house. I just want to be a modest home, maybe a little bit of land eventually when I get a little older. And I want to just internally better myself. I want to be a likable person to people. I want to be not really likable, I guess it's the wrong word. I want to be respectful. I want to be considerate. I also want to be assertive, and I want to like gain traits that I appreciate in people. That's my kind of overall goal in life. I want to find a serenity. I want to get over my past. So I feel like that's a huge part of it, is finding what drives you in life and figuring out how you can work towards those things. Because I mean, different things for you. You talked about you're building an empire. That's your thing. You want to build something, and that's what drives you in life. So I feel like each individual kind of might find something differently. And I'm not going to say what's right or wrong. Some people would be like, well, if money's your driving force, you're doing it wrong. I don't care what your driving force is. Just find something, that pushes you, that motivates you. Because I mean, honestly, I know from my personal experience, if I'm not motivated about something, I'll do it for about a week.
Ooh.
And I'll do it hard.
Yeah, say that again, man.
Yeah. If you want me to actually say it? I'll say it again. So if I'm not motivated about something, I'll do it for about a week. And that, I mean, maybe a little longer, but I've noticed this pattern in myself is like, I get really excited about something sometimes, and then I do it, and then I'm like, this sucks. I don't want to do this. I don't care about this. And about a week later, I'm like, nah.
No, and if there's no buy-in,
right?
If there's no buy-in from you as the individual, it's like, why progress on this? And it's so difficult to relate this to early recoveries, because we are in the trenches. Early recovery is the name of our game. That is our primary focal point in what we're working on. We're working on people that are in the action stage, probably not even hit maintenance yet. That is, by definition, really what we do as a job. And to relate to them, we talk over and over and over again that you need, first and foremost, you need to find some self-discipline. The next thing you need to do is you need to find responsibility, and that will end up leading to purpose, and when an individual finds enough self-discipline to say, I'm done, because and hear me clearly, I'm not saying all addiction is directly related to self-discipline. It is a part. Self-discipline is absolutely a part of recovery. Anybody that is telling you something otherwise, or trying to sell you something, it's snake oil. Dude, self-discipline is necessary for recovery. By its very nature, you have to have the self-discipline enough not to go down the street where you're going to find the crack dealer at the end of the street. Like it just is what it is.
Well, and yeah, I'll say self-discipline is one word you could use. Another one, I described it to my clients a lot too, is like, there has to be a strong desire. What I mean by that is, like, I tell people, and I've been honest with a couple of people that we've talked about this, is if you want to use drugs more than you want to be clean, then you will eventually use drugs.
Eventually.
Yeah, because I mean, triggers are real. They do happen. There are going to be times where there's going to be something that comes up for you, a feeling, emotion that you don't like, maybe a positive emotion that you really like and you want to celebrate it, maybe a negative physical state. There's a plethora of things that can cause triggers for substance use. And if your desire is now to get high stronger than it is to stay sober, you will not use the tools you were given to deal with these things, because at that point you've already kind of set yourself in motion. That's my personal belief. And that is, I think self-control is a very good explanation of that, but I feel like it goes a little bit deeper.
Well, and I think it's multi-leveled, I watched Shrek over the last couple of days, so yeah. Ogres are like onions. No, yeah. But it's
cake has layers.
Yeah, cake has layers. Parfaits have layers too. No, but we first talk about an early recovery of the decisional balance, and I think there's two different levels of decisional balance. The first happens in early recovery. The second happens in latter forms of recovery. The first decisional balance is directly related to the negative consequences are outweighing the positive benefits of me using my substance of choice. But I think the second layer is much more important, which is the difference between self-discipline and then purpose, or the difference between the I'm feeling obligated to do this versus I'm feeling that I want to do this. Right. And the people that are not able to slowly move their way into that are the ones that I see end up faulting, too often, because when the balance becomes, there's a heck of a lot better reasons to use than there is to not use. You may not use today, but you'll eventually relapse. It's a foregone conclusion. Versus when you start to build up the things around you that that you are afraid of losing, you start to build that case against why not to use. Because I know people, and I've been one of them many a times, where the reason I don't use today is not directly related to like, I things are going well or all that kind of stuff. I've been in the midst of the storm, the hurricane, many a times, but it's directly related to I cannot lose everything that I've built for myself. And if I use, I will lose that thing. Right. And sometimes that's a driving force. That can be more powerful than almost any other tool 100%. That you have, because there's a lot of tools out there that's like, especially in early recovery, like, well, I haven't built a lot yet, so I don't really want to use, versus later reforms of recovery. You're like, I have too much. It's too big of a gamble.
So I guess I'll put it this way too, for me, there's a couple things. Okay. So like my family's huge motivation. I destroyed my family when I was in my youth, because my family was not a bad family. They were very caring, very loving, and they did care a lot about me. So seeing me go through what I went through hurt them immensely. That motivates me. Personally, my life was terrible when I was using.
Terrible.
My life is less terrible now. Not perfect, but less terrible. No, I mean, my life is good. Things are bad sometimes. Don't get me wrong. Life still happens, but I enjoy myself. I have friends, and that's a motivator for me. Like, I have friends that are now very, very good for me. I really love them. I appreciate them. They're like brothers to me, ancestors, I guess, that I really, really enjoy. But then there's and those things, honestly, those things never kept me from getting high before. My family, I knew how devastated they were, and I still got high. I knew how miserable my life was. I still got high. I had some decent friends, and I lost them because I wanted to get high. Those things never stopped me before. What I've never had is success in things that I have, like I have a good job. I'm going back to college.
Mhm.
I'm going to college. I don't know, going back to school, I guess is what they call it for the first time, but I've never been to college.
I'm going to get me an education.
Exactly. So I'm doing that. I love my job. I have a very much so forward progression availability at my job, as I have self-proclaimed I am a manager for the past however long that's been going on now.
Trying to walk in that word of faith.
Exactly. Oprah Winfrey style, name it and claim it, or no, it's Joel Osteen, something like
A little
that.
bit about The Secret.
Yep. So I'm, I have that. I have a house. I don't have a house I own, but I rent a townhouse. And like, I pay my bills. I have some money in my account. I have a car. I have friends. I have really, really good friends, and like, I have things that I've had the friends before, I guess, but like, I've had things I've never had that much in my life before, because I started using at the age of 14 is when I started smoking marijuana and drinking. And then the meth started when I was 16. And that's the point, like, I had a car when I turned 16. And then about 17, I think, or 18, my parents I popped a tire and I was all high. So I left it on the side of the road for a while. And my parents came, changed the tire, took the car because it was still in their name, and said, "You're using this car to not get a job and get in trouble, so we're not going to let you have it anymore." And I paid for it. I paid for like half of it. I don't remember what exactly it was. They paid for some of it. But that whole thing, like, I lost that. I was bouncing couch to couch and stuff like that. So I never really had anything of motivation to stay sober. So like, now that I've built things in my life that I'm not willing to lose,
Well, and I think that's the strongest bit of evidence that we can create inside of a recovery, because you made I think you made the perfect point, honestly, and I can't overemphasize how extreme it is you had friends, you had family, that didn't stop you.
Right.
You may, in early recovery especially, mend some of those broken relationships that you saw, and that's a very important aspect of early recovery.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's in many of the 12-step programs of making amends wherever I can, as long as it doesn't negatively affect the individual or myself. And injure and negatively affect, tit for tat, tomato potato.
Potato.
Yeah. But the ultimately, one of the biggest reasons not to use is when you yourself have started to build your life, and
Right.
people cannot do that for you. It's going, it's wrapping everything that we've talked about on previous episodes of the self-efficacy, the ability to create something for yourself is what is going to prevent you from using. And the problem is that manifests for different people in different ways. There's people that don't use because they don't, they're in college now and they're like, I'm getting this education, I'm on the right path. There's people that don't use because they got a really solid job that's paying the bills finally, and
Right.
they're finally seeing, their savings account get a little bit of scratch in it.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, for you have to identify what's important to you, and honestly, don't do it as a toss off. Don't be like, well, my friends and family are important. Yeah, they're absolutely important. They're important for many people that have them.
Yeah.
Same time, you used before,
Right.
like what gets your fancy? What is something that it's like, regardless of what's going to happen, I'm going to continue to build, because that's going to be the thing that prevents you from using today.
Mm-hmm. I'll say the other, so a couple things on what you said. One of them is the other side of that, and this is something Dr. Powell and me talked about during his interview. He brought up, and I don't want to misquote him, but he said something along the lines of that substance use is a symptom of the problem.
Yes.
So that is the other critical point, is like, deal with your stuff, because there's reasons that like you decided to use in the first place, probably trauma-based for a lot of people. I don't want to say all people, but I would venture to say a large majority of people that use substances probably had some form of trauma. So that is a very important aspect too. When we talk about that a little bit, so unmet potential unpack trauma. So it's like we're kind of touching on both of those a little more in depth, but yeah. As far as what was the other thing I was going to say? Something along the lines of the potential thing that you were talking. Oh yeah. So internal things as well. That's something I didn't bring up, and I was like, man, that's true too, because I was a really cruddy kid. I was good with my dad, and then with my mom is like, and I talked to my therapist about this a long time ago when I was in treatment, and she said it was because she was a safe individual, but I was very disrespectful to my mom. I put her through a really hard time growing up, and
your mom's a saint, by the way.
She is.
How dare you?
Yeah, I know.
He is a saint of a woman. I've met her on so many occasions, and she brightens up the rooms that she walks into.
She's amazing, isn't she?
She's just a good person.
Yeah.
And there's very few of those just straight good people nowadays, but she's a person that you just know, moment you start talking to her, she's a good person.
Absolutely.
And you'd be willing to trust her with your kids.
That's how my grandma Taylor is too. She's just like, you meet her and you're like, you have the sweetest soul out of anyone I've ever met,
Old ladies in particular
Yeah.
tend to be very, very, sweet people. You just cling to them. But
anyways, so I was, disrespectful growing up, and then I got my substances, and obviously that made things a lot worse. And I was never had any peace in my life, never had any really serenity, never had any real experience with like loving people or anything like that. And I feel like that is a major motivator for me too, that keeps me from going back, because like I don't want to go back to the mental state I was in before. Because even in my moments of clarity, like I did this thing so many times. My cousin actually, one time we were talking and he's like, dude, you're stuck in a loop. You're doing the same thing over and over. Isn't that like what I would do is I would go out, I'd end up leaving whatever place I was staying at. Like I'd be at my grandparents' or parents, or I got to have a place with my uncle at one point. I would leave that place. I would go out. My life would crumble. I'd be bouncing couch to couch. I'd be living at the trap house, whatever the case may be. And then I'd lose everything. I'd be miserable. I'd lose my job. I'd lose, connection with my family again. And like all this stuff would start to kind of fall out of control. And then I got to the point where I was just miserable. So I was like, okay, I'm going to move back with my grandparents. I'm going to, clean it up a little bit. And then I'm going to go get a job. And then I go and I do those things. And then lo and behold, I get paid. I'd be doing all right. And then I'd be like, well, it would make this job a lot better. A little bit of meth would make this job a lot better, and I'd be right back off to it. And then slowly, gradually back over time. I never was clean longer than like maybe like a few weeks, a month, maybe.
sure.
So it was never anything like I wasn't trying to be clean. I just didn't have the money to not be clean, So it was like a continual loop for me. And I never regained enough clarity to have any sort of mental happiness. Because like, dopamine receptors, D2 receptors, whatever, it takes a long time for those to get back to where they're supposed to be, especially when you're talking about things like meth and things like that. It takes a very long time for your dopamine to start acting correctly. And then your brain has to register like, this amount of dopamine is not that terrible.
Yeah.
So,
well, and once again, you touched on a really interesting point, archetypes. But no, one of the things I've really been processing, especially over the last couple of weeks, I've recently become a father. And one of the things that I continue to ask myself, and anybody that knows me for any length of time knows that if you're talking to me, I will carry on a conversation. I will have input, but you can clearly see that like I'm thinking about two other things, like while I'm talking to you a lot of times. And one of the big things that you probably can see is, that I sit there and I will stare at a wall, and it's not staring at a wall and it's not staring into the distance. And I literally am shutting every sense that I can down just to really think and process some of the things that are going on. And one thing in particular about my now son, Jonah, is, I was thinking about what is the responsibility of a parent? What is my responsibility? And the thing that I pointed to that my mind kept on continually going to is my responsibility as a parent is to teach my child how to engage with the culture that he will inevitably have to live in. That is by definition, what my responsibility is. Now, obviously taking care of him and changing his diaper and bathing him, all those kinds of things, that's all baked into the cake. But ultimately, the end goal is to try to get to a point where he can interact with culture. Now, the reason I bring this up is I have seen, and I've seen it too many times not to start to notice the pattern. And I think you being a beneficiary of this, and you being as somebody that struggled with this, and then you probably seeing this.
I get money from somebody.
Yes.
Beneficiary. That's
fiduciary. No.
That's illegal.
Yeah. No, but you have probably seen this, and being somebody who has experienced this, you can probably speak to this. How you deal with younger recoveries. And I don't mean younger as in like they had less clean time. I mean younger as in their age versus how you deal with older recoveries are two drastically different things. Because when I'm dealing with a younger recovery, I approach it as this is an individual that more than likely has lacked in some way, shape, or form, lacked a parental figure, or at least lacked an assertive voice in their life that is telling them, in our case, how we first met in our relationship, I was a mentor. So it was somebody who is going to speak into your life and say, don't do that. This is why, and create the argument of like, you can do that, be my guest, but we're going to stop working with each other. Or you can do that, be my guest, but this will be the end result. And there was a couple times early on, especially, where I would tell you that, and then you do it anyways. And then you're like,
because I'm a G.
You'd be like, well, you were right on the end result. And then there was other times, I can think of a couple of specific times where I would tell you something that wasn't even in your sphere of thinking of like, go do this. A perfect example is like, go talk to Mike Kinoy, who he's going to be interviewed. I believe he's going to be on this Friday. But Mike Kinoy, or Kinoy, sorry, I would say Kinoy, like quinoa for some reason, but it's Kinoy.
Literally, I don't think anyone says his name. Right?
Yeah, I know, right? He just lets it go because he's
Yeah.
he's that great of a guy. He's listened to the podcast on Friday. He's a good guy. But I told you, go and make amends. Go do this to them. And it was something that was above and beyond. It was something that wasn't even in your sphere. And then you would go do it, and I'd ask you, how was the result? And you'd be like, it's really good.
Mm-hmm.
It opened up doors. It did something. It made something. It was different than what it was before. And what I have to say to that is, especially in young recoveries, you need to find a mentor. I don't care if it's a sponsor. I don't care if it's a work mentor, but you need to find somebody who no hold bars is going to talk into your life. And I mean, somebody who's good. Not you need to be really careful on what that looks like. You know, don't let any Tom, Dick, or Harry come into your life and start speaking nonsense and saying you should do this and this, and like, find somebody who's going to say, stop doing that. You should do this. This is why. And then here's the kicker, and this is the difficult part. Humble yourself enough to listen to their advice and do it and walk it out. Would you say, especially in the context of the mentor-mentee relationship that we initially had, that I would tell you to do things that you didn't want to do, but you would do them and it'd have a result?
Yeah, sometimes, most of the time. Sometimes I do, sometimes I wouldn't.
I know sometimes you wouldn't, because you'd come after me. You'd come back to me, and the first thing I would say to you is, "Did you do it? Did you do it?" And the next thing I say, "Why didn't you do it?"
Right. But yeah, no, I mean, I feel like, what was the question?
Well, the question, I think directly, is how we deal with younger recoveries. We understand them as an individual that is lacking an authoritative figure in their life and needing somebody, not speaking from a measure of authority, but speaking as a measure of like, you need to do this with your life, not you're a screw up and all that kind of stuff, but saying you could really have something here. I've told you this. I have this conversation a dozen times if I've had it once with younger recoveries. I break it down for them, how long it takes to get a doctorate in the United States, usually 7 to 14 years, depending on your education level that you already have. If you're 20 years old and it takes you 14 years to get your doctorate, if you don't even have a GED, then by the time you're 34, you can have your doctorate, which means you can be practicing medicine or whatever you want for 30 years and retire out at 65, having a 30-year career. What's your excuse? Like, do something.
Right. So I think we have a little bit different approach to young recovery, but I believe that we're pretty much both on the same page as well. So when people are, like we were talking about, younger ages in recovery, I know for me, I was very lost when I came into the real world. Because like I really like through the drugs and everything, I really kind of got really screwed up in the head. Not like I didn't have like severe mental health stuff going on, but just really did not know who I was.
You were in the matrix. You had a perspective of reality that it was cognitive dissonance. It did not match the actual reality in front of you.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So there was a whole slew, and I was very lost, and I didn't know how to do things. I didn't know what adults did. I didn't know how to function life. Like literally my first experience of being a real adult, I moved 2 states away from my parents, so I couldn't ask them for much advice or, things like that. So I was very, very lost in my sense of like what to do with my life. And I needed that voice in my life. It was very comforting. You're the first person to really talk to me the way you did. I've never had anyone in my life say like, ask me what I meant by what I was saying. That was one thing. You always said that. What do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean? Or what are you thinking? Things like that. Like I never had that. And I never had people ask me, what do you want? Like, who does Hunter want to be? If everything goes perfectly 10 years from now, where do you see yourself? I never really had anyone in my life ever ask me what I want.
Exhibit A.
Yeah. So it's like now I like have a direction in my life because it forced me to think about some things. And I also had somebody I could talk to about stuff that was going on. So I feel like a mentor in someone's life is extremely important. Now, the way that it's received might be a little bit different. Like with me and my sponsors are kind of close to mentors. He does not tell me to do or not to do something. In the program, we call it suggestions. But like he even told me, he said, if you ever call me when you use, I'm not going to tell you no. So call me. Don't not call me because you think I'm going to tell you no, because I won't tell you no. I'll just tell you why it's a bad idea.
Well, and you're a sponsor, and I'm not going to out the individual because, program of anonymity, but I know your sponsor personally.
Awesome.
is not only awesome, he's a professional of the highest caliber. He's a trained, I'm not going to say what, but he's
one of us.
He's one of us, but I mean, as far as a sponsor goes, you got top caliber.
Yeah.
I mean, top shelf, like no pun intended, sponsor and then saying they're top shelf, but they are somebody who you got lucky on that one. And I'm so happy that you ended up choosing that individual.
Yeah. But so like with him, I'm a grown man.
I'm a grown man.
Well, I feel like now I've gotten a lot of responsibility. I have a lot of self-respect. I have a lot of I'm not egotistical at all. I think you could attest to that. I'm very, very modest.
Well,
sometimes
he's modest to everybody other than me.
Yeah. I'm like,
he tells me what he tells me is what he's really thinking.
Yes. I'm like, I'm a manager and you should give me a raise. But just on another note, I broke the computer. But yeah, so I'm a lot more modest and stuff, but like, I do know pretty confidently where I'm going in my life. So like at this point in my life where I'm at now in my recovery and in my life, I don't really want people to tell me what to do necessarily. I like advice. I like suggestions. I like awareness of what might happen. But quite frankly, if someone's like, don't do that because bad things will happen and you absolutely should not do that and you should do this, I'll probably be like, this guy doesn't even know what he's talking about. Just because,
I had a lot of those conversations with you until what happened?
Until I did them.
Until you did them, you're like, oh.
Yeah, even now, I'd say like the way you and me talk, it's not very much of like telling me what to do. It's a lot of like, and it was back then too, I'd say to a certain extent, it was telling me why it was a good idea to do a certain thing.
Well, I invited you to participate in your own life.
Yeah, exactly. And I never, that was amazing for me. I feel like in young recovery, figuring out someone that can make you really think about what you want, work for what you want. And then another thing you said is like, or exactly what it is. It's like your coined phrase that you say sometimes. It was like, no one owes you anything. Life isn't fair. That stuff happened. Now what?
It's said in a much more not child friendly way, but yeah.
I mean, more or less. And that was something like when you said that, I was like, at first it kind of strikes you off. You're like, this guy's kind of a something.
And he definitely had that feeling about me at first. He the first couple of weeks, he did not want to hang out with me until one time in particular, we started chopping it up about faith. But yeah,
I think we were eating in a Longhorn Steakhouse over there, something like that. But yeah, I mean, it struck me off guard, but it really made me open my eyes a little bit. Cause I feel like in a younger age for me, I felt like the world kind of owed me something. I felt like that things should be handed to me or that opportunities should be proposed to me. I see that a lot in our culture today. I see that permeated a lot where people think like, the life's going to be fair and everything should be exactly right. And I grew up with my mom always telling me, I'd be like, that's not fair. Well, life's not fair. Get over it. That was like my mom's phrase.
Your mom's prophetic phrase of telling you really how well. And I think that's the worst part about our culture. If I can rip on one thing, and I can rip on many things, I'm sure, about our culture, but one thing in particular is the cognitive dissonance that we instill in our children. Once again, going back into, being a new father, but the cognitive dissonance we instill in our children versus the reality of the world around them. Right. We tell them, you can be anything, you can do this, you can do that, and this, that, and stuff. Instead of telling them like, what do you want to do? Pursue it with everything that you have. Get your house in order. Get those things lined up so that if you really want to do this, it can happen. And I'd never heard that growing up. Right. And that was something that I had to come to a self-realization about. And the moment that I did, it was the revelation that changed my life forever of like, what did I want to do? Now go after it. Right. And we don't tell that to kids anymore. Yeah. I feel like there's a balance of that, right? Because I know when I was growing up, one of the messages I heard, my mom is a very cautious person. She's very like, this could happen sort of thing. Like there's risks in certain things. So it's a little bit hard to talk to her about like goals I'm going to be setting and stuff like that sometimes, and I've talked to her about this too. So like there's a line, right, where it's like, instead of like saying you can do anything you want to do, that's realistic. You could do anything you want to do, but she was also like, well, you don't really want to do that because this could happen sort of thing. That's kind of like a little bit of how her mentality was. And I love her to death. I'm not talking bad about it at all, but I feel like there's a balance there. It's like, you can do anything you want to do, but figure out what you're going to do and do it. And if someone's like, well, I'm going to be a president, then do what you need to do to become the president, Well, maybe not like 5 years old or something, because then you're just like, yeah, you can be president. No, but I think that's a very important aspect, because when they're a little kid, you don't tell them anything, but we don't instill in our middle schoolers or our high schoolers like, your life as an adult has started now. You don't know it yet. You don't see it yet, but it has started right now because our education system is broken. We can go on for hours about that, but at the end of the day, it's like, get good grades in middle school. Why? So you can get into the better classes in high school that they reserve for the smart kids. Why? So that you can get into a better college because you have it on your degree. Why? So that at that college you can be competitive in the job market. These things all interlink and intertwine. Elementary school, that's basically just making sure that you don't die.
Right.
That's it. That's for lack of a better term, it's starting you with a couple of the base steps and then making sure that it's basically a daycare. But ultimately you get into middle school, high school, college and all that kind of stuff. You're off to the races.
Right.
And especially in younger recoveries in particular, once again, age and not necessarily the recovery time. The thing that I think is missing so often is, first and foremost, make a list of the things you don't want to do, because it's a laundry list. Make a list of the things you can't do. You're not going to become a professional basketball player. Why not? Because I'm not 7 foot. Like I'm not,
I could be a forward.
Yeah, right. Like I'm not, well, what about Scottie Pippen? What about Scottie Pippen? No,
Right.
but you're, if you've never played basketball in your life, you obviously don't want to become a professional basketball player. You never played football in your life until your senior year of high school, and you didn't like it that much. Like, make out the list that you want to do, then pursue it with everything that you have. And I, as a parent, or I as a mentor, or I as a friend, my job is to help provide you with the tools or resources to be able to go do that. Everything else, step out of the way. That's my job.
Yeah. That is an interesting point. Figure out what you don't want to do first. I feel like I never took that approach, and that would have been kind of interesting to figure out, like, career-wise. Because, like, luckily, I fell into the job that I have now, and I figured out, like, I really love this. This is what I want to stay in this field, not necessarily just a peer recovery coach, but I want to stay in the substance use field in this kind of lane, or I guess in this lane a little bit. So, like, I figured that out, but, like, without that, I really had no idea where I was going to go. I knew there's some stuff I didn't want to do somewhat. Like, I don't want to work construction. I'm not, like, that into physical labor for 8 hours. That's not really my thing.
Fair.
I don't want to work in a factory because I'm like, I like to interact with people.
Well, how many people actually want to do construction or work in a factory? I'm sure there's some that actually want to do construction. And guess what? Do you know what they end up doing? They end up becoming foremen.
Yeah.
They end up becoming, the leaders in the construction field.
Yeah.
They become unionized. They become people that really want to do this. And that's like, they took that and ran with it. I'm not knocking on construction workers, not by any stretch of the imagination. No, not knocking on them at all. Yeah, they're making a lot of money. Yeah. And if they enjoy what they're doing, if you were playing with the Tonka truck as a kid and now you get to drive one of those cats around, good for you, dude. That's great. But if you were somebody who is basically like, why are you doing construction? Because I need a paycheck. That's a problem. You need to figure out what you need to do with your life.
Yeah. I mean, there's a point, and I've talked to some people about this, because recovery or not, this is very typical, is, I don't know how to say this. It's like almost complacency, but like finding a job because you need a job. Great. You need a job. You are correct. First thing, when I first moved up here, I got a job right away because I needed a job. Was that the job I was going to spend the rest of my life at? No, but I needed a job, but I was not satisfied with that job. So I kept pushing forward to something else. So, like, I see a lot of people get in that job. They're like, well, I'm getting a paycheck. I hate my job, but I'm going to stay here.
Get comfortable.
Yeah. And it's almost sad to see, because it's like, if you hate your job, you work 40 hours a week. That's a big part of your life. If you hate that part of your life, what are you doing?
Well, and I think you touched on a point. We're already at the end of this, but I think you touched on a point that we definitely have to talk about in the next meditation, which is fear. Fear of the unknown. Yeah. Fear of the unknown is what prevents everyone from succeeding.
Right.
Boom. Just like that. Well, just like that, everybody, we once again, this is a Wednesday cast, which means meditation. This Friday, we're going to be interviewing Mike Kinoy, who is the director of Endeavor House Ministries, located in Lansing, Michigan. Great guy, great man of faith. Hunter interviews him, just fantastic person. If you haven't already, please subscribe to us. And also, if you haven't already, go back to last month. Go back to the ACEs training 1, 2, and 3. We had a couple of guest lectures. They are fantastic. Definitely worth the listen to. But as always, Monday we do the science of addiction. Wednesdays we do meditations, and Fridays we interview. Thanks. Just break the mic.
Maybe.
No, you didn't.